After all that, you get home. Now you got to recover. This is when all your adrenaline and flushed out your body, and everywhere you got hit comes back. This is where all the places that you could withstand during this fight come back. Now, this is something that people don't ever tell you and explain to you, and people who don't really fight don't have an understanding of this. But number one, when you're in a fight, when you're seriously about to take on a fight, your body gets flushed with adrenaline. And so it makes you able to go on into battle. And then you go into it and you fight and you get surprised with some things. It's just you never know what's going to happen, so you're just immediately adapting to everything that's coming at you. And then you got to recover. The fight's over with. Now you got to recover. Man, the pain that comes into your body as the adrenaline flushes all away, and then now you're just dealing with your nerves and the bruised and battered portions of your body. That right there will change the way that you think about fighting whenever you go forward into your future from these points. What I noticed is a lot of the kids around my school or my neighborhood, we weren't the type of people, the people who really fought, we weren't the type of people to run around talking about fighting and I bet you won't and all that stuff. We wasn't testers. We was all fighters. So we was just waiting for the opportunity. Like we was waiting for the opportunity for this to become real. As soon as it became real, we was at it. We wasn't waiting for nothing. We wasn't worried about nothing. We just fought. And so what I noticed was that the people who didn't really fight like we did were talkers. They do a whole lot of pump faking and a whole lot of jumping at you, all that. I wish you would, all that stuff. They do a whole lot of pump faking, but they don't really throw nothing. They never bust a grape. All of us that bust a grape, we'll sit there, you'll see some, because you could see it. You see somebody hands, they tighten up or they stance change a little bit, the shoulders get a certain type of way, and then it's all hands. It ain't no conversation. I was the type to I would get real quiet and I'll get real mad. Sometimes I used to get so mad that my anger would shake me up and then I would have tears coming out my face, but I wasn't crying like sad. I was like a hot pot that's blowing its top. It's like nowhere else for the anger to go. And so I would just be overcome with anger. And then I was like, oh, like that's what it was like for me. So oftentimes, whenever I was pushed to that limit, my eyes would the tears would come out my eyes, and now I'm fighting. And in general, I was a pretty peaceful kid. Like, I mean, I did have a little anger problem back then, but I was in general a peaceful kid. But I had zero tolerance for being played with or being tried. If that happened, I wouldn't start something with you, but I finish everything. And that was my circumstance. I finished everything. I was kind of like a match. It only took that strike. As soon as you hit that strike, it's all fire from there out. And I had a policy that I got to finish this situation and be able to walk away safe. So I'm going to fight you until you can't fight me. That was my policy back then. Today, this is remarkably dangerous. And I mean, I'm sure it was probably dangerous whenever I was a kid too. Anything could have happened. You could hit somebody, they fall and hit something, or you hit somebody in a certain type of place and they have a long lasting effect or something like that. But today, it's remarkably a different landscape than it was when I was a kid. There's a lot of things that flew when I was a kid, stuff I can't even say on here, that it was all okay or all accepted when I was a kid. And nowadays, man, that stuff I have you canceled and thrown under the courthouse for. So it was a far different time that my childhood kind of took place in as opposed to now or in comparison to now. My grades, the type of student I was, man, I was a really smart kid and I was always very keen on my relationships with my teachers. I liked learning. I always had really good grades. I had A and B all the time. I was on the A and B honor roll for the most of my childhood and school career. Most of the time I had A's and B's. Every now and again I make a C. I didn't fail anything. I didn't make no D's. But the thing is, in this span of time from kindergarten to, especially from kindergarten all the way to fifth grade, in that space, the principal's office knew me by first name because I was in there so much. I was getting suspended all the time. And it wasn't like now there's a lot of other implications for things. And like back then they had expulsion, but you didn't get expelled unless it was like it was almost a criminal offense. You had to do something that broke the law for you to get expelled. It had to be something remarkably egregious. Fighting wasn't something that they prosecuted like that back then. And I mean, I fought a lot. I fought a lot. Every single grade I was fighting, and I was getting suspended. I get suspended several times, but I never was suspended more than 3 days. I got suspended for a 3 day period. In my elementary school, they didn't really have detention that I recall, but suspension they definitely would have, and I get suspended anywhere from 1 to 3 days. But to me, I wasn't processing the long term effects or any kind of stuff like that. I was just like, oh, I'm suspended, and then I would go home and I'd be like, man, shoot, I get it's a free day off. I get to watch go watch all the cartoons and all that stuff that I can't do whenever I'm at school and whatnot. But the only thing though is that my mama, this is back when we had VCRs. So if you know anything about it, your mama will watch the stories talking about Young and the Restless, As the World Turns. You know what I'm talking about? So my mom would have the VHS player set up so that it record her stories. She have it programmed all perfectly, so that thing in there working, it's a little robot clicking and clacking. So as soon as it came on, you can't change the channel. So I'm sitting there, I'm stuck, suspended, having to watch stories. Man, I'm sitting here getting into this stuff. I'm like, man, well, what channel gonna do next? Oh, like you ain't have no you ain't have no choice, but you go watch some TV. And so that was a funny little nuance about that stuff too. You mess around getting into the stories on accident, and because you can't mess that tape up. If you mess that tape up, you about to get in some more trouble. And I messed it up a few times. Okay, so the rules at my school for fighting were that whoever throws the first punch is supposed to be the person who gets suspended because the other person is looked at as defending themselves. So when people would come up at me and try to start a fight with me, I'd be like, just throw the first punch. Just throw the first punch. And I that was my little phrase. I'd be like, throw the first punch. Because I knew that if I had enough people watching and they threw the first punch, I could argue that I was defending myself and not get suspended. And that was my goal, because getting suspended was cool because you could watch cartoons and stay at home. It was cool that way. But one of the things that I hated, I didn't even care about suspension. I hated making up work. I hated making up work, missing a test, or missing perfect attendance. Perfect attendance was something that really mattered to me back then, and it was so crazy. When I was a kid, Little Caesars was a pizza place that existed, and they made fresh pizza. I know nowadays they got that ready in 5 minutes type of pizza, or whatever the case, where you can go already ready to pick up type of pizza. They used to make this big square pizza and then chop it in Chicago style, and it was pretty good. Like it was pretty tasty back then. But the thing that they made that was really good to me when I was a kid was the breadsticks. They had these breadsticks. I guess they might have had a little garlic on them. They had some butter on them. They were nice and soft and piping hot, and you get marinara sauce with it. At my school, if you had perfect attendance, you get this little award. And so that told you had perfect attendance, but then also you get this little certificate to Little Caesars. Now, as an adult, I'm calculating this up and I'm like, man, I'm staying in school for every single day to get a certificate for some breadsticks that probably cost like $6 or something like this. Man, I didn't do none of the math of that when I was a kid. I didn't do no calculation of what this was really like. I just said, man, I want to get that breadstick certificate. I want them Little Caesars breadsticks. I never even asked my mom to purchase them. I waited a whole year every year to get this certificate. Oh, and it would burn me up if I didn't make perfect attendance. So that was the thing I would be shooting for all the time. I get my grades and all that, but I was trying not to miss a day. I mean, if I was sick, I'd be like, I'm all right, I can make it. Because I was trying to get that Little Caesars breadsticks and got doggone marinara sauce. Fool, that thing was good. Shoot, working hard for $6 and some change. Ain't that something? Back to the rules. So the rules were first punch, get suspended. Second punch was defending himself. So I was able to avoid suspension a few times that way. But I got suspended a whole bunch more times. And even whenever I didn't throw the first punch, I got suspended a whole lot more times. And there was some times for sure that I threw the first punch. I wasn't gonna wait. Like I I started getting it. I guess I was creating strategy in my head because I was thinking through some of this stuff, and I was like, man, if I wait for the first punch, I done already lost the opportunity for me to get the upper hand. So I was like, man, forget this. I'm gonna start throwing the first punch. And sometimes you just be so mad you don't even care what happened after that. And so that was what the result of some of that was. I would get suspended a number of times and whatnot, but I guess they all knew that I was a good kid or something because I never had threats of expulsion. I never had no whole bunch of issues with my mom having to come up to the school a whole bunch of times and nothing like that. But I would fight a lot. Also, there was a thing too. So if the with the bus, if you fought on the bus or at the bus stop, you would still be able to get suspended by the school. But away from the bus stop counted as neighborhood, and it wasn't school, it didn't count as school property. So as long as you wasn't on school property and you got in a fight, you were straight. So there were some fights that we would have too. We would cross the street from the school and then go fight somebody. So it was all kinds of little things that we would we would learn the rules and then kind of finagle the rules to get our little fighting on. But one of the costs to all this fighting that I was doing was having to go to the counselor. I had to go see I had to go see this counselor for a while. She was in the same building that the nurse was in. And that was when I first learned about, they taught me to count to 10. If you get angry, they said count to 10. And but they said count backwards from 10. So you count 10, 9, 8, 7. So they taught me to do that. And I tried that a few times. I mean, maybe it did work a little bit, but I in my head I was just like, this goofy as hell. I'm sitting here counting, but this fool about to steal on me. I'm gonna make sure that I don't get hit, or I'm gonna make sure that I don't get hit and staggered. I'm about to punch this fool. So the count to 10 for me, I was working my logic out of that. I wasn't emotionally mature enough in my little elementary school age to process that down and be like, yeah, make sure you process this so you don't take yourself too far and then get into a fight. I was like, man, listen, I'm about to count down to the number to the number of punches I'm about to throw, or to the point that I'm about to throw a punch. But like, bro, this counting down thing, I don't know about this here.